quality, and what sizes we needed. Gritty Gear Company was great to work with. They got us what we needed on time, and now everybody's looking great around the station in their new gear. Start your order at grittygearco.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like many of you, I still collect physical books, and not just any books, but books about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. I go to Megas Books and Herbs, located in the Arts District of Minneapolis, but books are only part of it. Megas Books and Herbs offers crystals, jewelry, herbs, oils, and consultations on how to use this stuff. Check out their in-store classes and events too. This place has everything to expand your horizons. Located at 1848 Central Avenue, Minneapolis, or visit megasbooks.com.
Are you one of thousands of individuals who know you have psychic abilities but don't know how to tap into your higher self? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who offers classes that can help you reach your goals. Refined Divine holds classes Monday and Thursday at her 2 locations and via Zoom. Classes consist of manifestation, learning psychic abilities, shadow work, and healing trauma. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
This is Psychic Medium Deb. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
With a look at your AM 950 weather, I'm Patrick Lolia. Tonight, partly cloudy with a low of 59, then showers and thunderstorms possible Thursday with a high of 85. Join Alok, a trans icon and comedy sensation, for Harry's Situation at the Uptown Theater on October 23rd. It's funny, it's flippant, it's fabulous, and it's not to be missed. Get your tickets now at Ticketmaster.com.
Portions of the following program may be pre-recorded.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story, this is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining me tonight on this Wednesday evening. And normally on Wednesdays, we have over in Eden Prairie, Adam joining us, running the board from the station. Unfortunately, Adam is under the weather tonight, so he's not going to be able to join us. So I believe he's going to be with me on Friday for Casual Friday. So, but if you're all wondering where he is tonight, he's homesick, I'm sorry to say, and hopefully he gets better real soon. I mean, I think there's something going around. I have something at the moment, but doing the show from my home, I can that's okay. I can be sick and still do the show. So that's how that works. You know, all week we've been talking about UFOs. We've been talking about aliens, and I don't come from a place of like, do they exist? I'm hook, line, and sinker. And yesterday I shared my experience of a CE5 experiment I did with my friend, and that went over very well. And I just wanted to thank everybody for being very supportive of that, because it's a very personal experience, to be very honest. And my friend, who I've been very careful not to say his name, wants to come on the show and share his side of it, what he experienced, and I definitely want to do that. So look forward to that coming up in maybe sometime September, October. We'll do something like that. So just pay attention, and we'll be bringing him on as well. Tonight, though, I am really excited. I've talked about this before. I really enjoy the stories of especially presidents and aliens, and we had on our guest about 2 months ago, something like that. We were talking about President Richard Nixon, showing Jackie Gleason bodies of aliens. I mean, that's pretty crazy on its own, but to me, completely believable. And it was such a great conversation, and so many people really enjoyed it. I wanted to bring back author Paul Blake-Smith tonight to talk about something else. And what we're talking about tonight is from another book he wrote. The book is called President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. And we're talking about a situation where President Eisenhower may have met aliens and created some sort of, I don't know if the word treaty or an agreement or whatever it is. It's such an interesting conversation that I really wanted to have this. So, Paul, welcome to GhostBox Radio.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And so, first of all, I've been reading the book. It's so fascinating. And what I found even more interesting is I'm watching some of these like Discovery Channel programs about UFOs and stuff. And one was about the presidents and UFOs, just like what we're talking about, what you've written in your books. And I was really surprised that what you are talking about in your book that we just talked about, that is President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. I was watching one that they're going through presidents from FDR to Kennedy, only that short amount of time. And when they brought up Eisenhower, it really was more like he's unaware of anything that's going on. By that point, power and any sort of discussion about UFOs was strictly with the Majestic 12. And I'm curious to start off with, and I obviously get you in to talk about the entire story. Is this something that not a lot of people talk about? Is this something that mainly has come from like written by like you and maybe a few others?
Yeah, I think Eisenhower was just the opposite. He probably knew more about extraterrestrial visitation than almost any president. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into the reasons why. But I think it began in World War II when he was head of the Allied forces in Europe, trying to get everyone on the same page to fight and destroy the Nazi Empire. And there were so many Foo Fighters or daylight discs, orbs, things that were dodging in and out of aerial traffic, bombers and fighters and such. And the reports made their way to Eisenhower. And in one case, supposedly Eisenhower discussed this with Churchill, mm-hmm. A particularly noteworthy UFO that kind of dodged around and dogged a British bomber as it went over the British Channel, the English Channel, and that they decided, let's keep this under wraps. Let's not discuss it. We don't want to disturb the people who would need to focus on the war effort and not whether we're alone in the universe. And they are also both deeply Christian men. And they said, we don't want to disrupt the church or people's belief in God. And when he became president a decade later, Eisenhower became the first U.S. president to be baptized in office in his first month. He wanted to show how serious he was. And he also was the force behind putting "In God We Trust" on our currency. And he went to church pretty regularly, and he was serious. So think what you may of that. He was focused on obeying God and being a good Christian. And it may have influenced him to say, our people aren't ready for this. When he found out there was an extraterrestrial presence and they wanted to meet him, some of them did, and he went for it and did speak to them in person. And that's what this book is all about. And I'm happy to say, a little scoop for your listeners, that I can't say a whole lot, but I am in talks with a Hollywood producer to turn this and the Eisenhower encounter into major motion pictures. Now, anything can go wrong, but you're getting the inside scoop tonight before something may blow up much bigger in the years to come on the big screen, or possibly straight to a streaming channel at least. So let's keep our fingers crossed. But it's such a fascinating subject, and I've put together like this mountain of circumstantial evidence, as you read in the book, that Eisenhower was told that through apparently some binary high-frequency radio communications with an orbiting extraterrestrial race, that they were eager to meet him in person, were friendly and unarmed with no evil intent, and he was accustomed to the subject of extraterrestrial visitation. He knew it was a reality, had his own UFO encounter in early 1952, just before he announced his candidacy for the presidency. So he went for it. He was advised, according to a congressman who read the document and made this little video, a state congressman, I think in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. He read the document and said that Eisenhower was urged to go ahead and have this meeting, and he did. He set it up for Palm Springs, which was about an hour's drive or less than that for a flight to Edwards Air Force Base out in the California desert, out in the middle of nowhere, basically, where there couldn't be really any eyewitnesses. And while he was out there in a golf vacation, 2,700 miles away from Washington, they did land, and they met with Air Force officials at Edwards Air Force Base. And for a few hours, it was determined that they are truly what they said, friendly, unarmed, and they want to speak to the man in charge, and that's Eisenhower. So they called Eisenhower. He was not actually on the golf course at the time, but he knew something was up. And they urged him, why don't you come on over? And so he did. And he took a flight, some say by helicopter, and others say a short private plane flight. He did not take what was called Air Force One or the Columbine. That was left at the Palm Springs airport. He took a different airport, and he flew in there in the cover of darkness while the press was distracted by a party in Palm Springs, a big party at their hotel. And I submit in my book that this was part of Eisenhower's plan, because this was prearranged, and he needed to go about his business without the media following him, the White House press. So they had this big party that drew rave reviews for their entertainment and everything, and free smokes and free drinks for the media. Mm-hmm. And Eisenhower went out to Edwards Air Force Base and came back probably around midnight, maybe, and no one was the wiser.
Wow. First of all, congratulations on this possibility with big studios. Let's hope, because I mean, this is something that it lends itself. Let's even take away whether it's real or not, just for a second. It's a great story.
Yeah. It is the idea. Oh, come on! That's what I first thought when I first read this back in the '80s. I'm very old. And I read this, I thought, a president and aliens, come on. But they had the story. It went viral of sorts in the 1980s, and there were various mentions in pop culture about this. And they even made a movie. I could never remember the title of this. It was like My High School Science Project or something like this. And the first 10 minutes were devoted to Eisenhower went to this Air Force base to see extraterrestrials. And then it developed into kind of a monster movie. And these high school kids broke into the airplane hangar in the movie to see what was locked up. And, anything can be made up by Hollywood. And hopefully it won't be too fictionalized when they supposedly take my book and turn it into a movie. We'll see. But the point is that Eisenhower spoke English to them, and they spoke English right back. They had landed on the tarmac and the runway at Edwards Air Force Base on a remote part of the base, at a distant runway away from the compound, where apparently a lot of military personnel were told to beat it ahead of time, given their possessions, and told, don't come back for a while, go get lost somewhere.
Right.
And they went on leave in the nearest town. And so there was a lot of privacy, a lot of security around Eisenhower. He had about 6 bodyguards. And one of them was a U.S. Air Force test pilot at the time who spoke out in the 1980s, because he had learned that everyone who was there at that historic meeting had just died. Over the years, they passed away. And he said, I was at the meeting. I'm the last one there who's still around today, and I'm going to tell this story anonymously. I don't want my name being used, because he was still on an Air Force pension medical plan. Sure. He didn't want to get into trouble, or his family. Yeah. But he told the story that Eisenhower and the aliens never touched each other, came within a fairly close distance, and had a cordial conversation on the runway at the lip of this airplane hangar. And there were 5 ships, 3 circular, 2 elongated, or what we call cigar-shaped, and that the aliens looked somewhat like humans, only a little misshapen by our standards.
Interesting. Now, I also read in your book that there was thought that this some of this might have been filmed.
Right.
Now, and my question to you is, do you know, and you may, I'm assuming you'd be aware of this documentary from the 70s that was supposed to have footage of like a real UFO landing at an airbase, UFOs past, present, and future. And I'm curious if you knew or you thought that this would have been the footage that they were going to put into that film that was suddenly didn't happen.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter on that in my Nixon Gleason Alien Encounter book, which is a sequel to the Eisenhower story. Supposedly, this happened in 1971, and I think Holloman Air Force Base.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, 3 discs came over, and one was obviously having mechanical problems and managed to land on a runway and outstep some friendly extraterrestrials who spoke. I don't know whether it was in English verbally or used mental communication, but that was an interesting story, apparently during Nixon's time in office. So that came about in 71. The Eisenhower story was February 19th, 1954. And just as one little piece of, I think, important information, Nixon went to Homestead Air Force Base over this extraterrestrial matter that he let Jackie Gleason in on the 19th anniversary of that, February 19th, 1973. I don't think it was a coincidence. I think Nixon had to be there to attend to a kind of treaty renewal that Eisenhower first established nearly 2 decades before. But this is where we get into what exactly was discussed between Eisenhower and these friendly humanoids that came from either another world or another dimension.
So why don't we go ahead and do this? I got some questions in the comments. Let me get in a break first before we go into what maybe they talked about, because I want to make sure that I don't interrupt you too terribly much, because this is I love this. This is really interesting. People in the comments are loving it as well. Folks, if you have any questions for Paul, put them in the comments. I saw a couple in there. We'll get to them, but let's go ahead, take our first break. When we come back, more with Paul Blake Smith. We are talking about President Eisenhower's close encounters, and it seems like there's a lot going on here. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Twin Cities Con returns to the Minneapolis Convention Center for their 4th year, November 8th through 10th. Twin Cities Con is a celebration of comics, toys, TV, film, art, cosplay, games, and all things nerdy. It's also a family-friendly event where you can meet your favorite celebrities, browse the vendor hall and artist alley for the coolest merch, watch celebrity Q&A, and even more. Twin Cities Con is bigger and better than ever before, with guests like Anakin Skywalker himself, Hayden Christensen, Stephanie Beatrice from Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Encanto, WWE Hall of Fame wrestler Sting, and Lou Diamond Phillips. Plus, your favorite voice actors. 3 days of action-packed fun in the heart of Minneapolis at the Minneapolis Convention Center. Tickets start at $25. Kids tickets are just $8 for the entire weekend. VIP tickets also available, including some really cool VIP perks. Don't wait to get your tickets because early bird pricing is for a limited time. Buy your tickets and get more information at TwinCitiesCon.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like you, I love good, fresh, delicious food. So I want to tell you about this treasure in Roseville called Maverick's Real Roast Beef. Maverick's has the best roast beef sandwiches I've ever had. Made fresh every order. Add fries or onion rings dropped in the fryer when ordered, and you have a winning combination. Maverick's Real Roast Beef has a lot more than roast beef, so check out their website, mavericksbeef.com, or check out their restaurant on Lexington in Roseville. Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
This is Chad, owner of AM 950. Recently, I had a large order of custom designed t-shirts that needed to be turned around in a hurry. I knew exactly who to call. Grady Gear Company. Grady Gear Company is a local company that handles large and small custom clothing and apparel orders. I had a lot of questions from color, shirt quality, and what sizes we needed. Gritty Gear Company was great to work with. They got us what we needed on time, and now everybody's looking great around the station in their new gear. Start your order at grittygearco.com.
Greg Bakun here. Like many of you, I still collect physical books, and not just any books, but books about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. I go to Megas Books and Herbs, located in the Arts District of Minneapolis, but books are only part of it. Megas Books and Herbs offers crystals, jewelry, herbs, oils, and consultations on how to use this stuff. Check out their in-store classes and events too. This place has everything to expand your horizons. Located at 1848 Central Avenue, Minneapolis, or visit megasbooks.com. And welcome back to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I have with us tonight author Paul Blake Smith. We are talking about his book, President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. And I do want to just remind folks, if you want to buy this book or this book about the Nixon-Gleason a meetup with alien dead bodies or whatever that he'd written about, I put together on my page, ghostboxradio.com / Ghostbox Book Club. It's a way for you to go and get these books through Amazon, but then it's an affiliated link and it helps the show out as well. So it's ghostboxradio.com, Ghostbox Book Club. Consider getting it through there. Otherwise, get it through Amazon. Do you have it, Paul? Do you have them over at like Barnes and Noble and other places as well?
Unfortunately, no. That's always ticked me off with my publishers. They don't have it on a Barnes and Noble bookshelves as a physical copy. You have to buy it from Amazon, or you can get the audiobook from Tantor.com, and it's a really good read. I recommend that too.
Okay. So yeah, don't go to Barnes and Noble for it. Stay away from it. You're not going to find it there. That's all I know about it.
And I got one just down the street, like around the corner, practically.
I mean, wouldn't you want to see your books in a, like the book, go in a book's and find it there? That's unfortunate.
Yes, that's what I tell my publishers, and
they're just like, yeah, that's great. So we're having a great conversation. Some folks in the comments, it's kind of fun. Linda was like, she had an aha moment. She's like, who wrote the book about Nixon and Gleason? And then she's just like, oh, that's all right. His voice sounds familiar. He's the one that wrote it. So we're I think we understand each other now, Paul. I think we're all up to date here in the chat here. Oh, Linda says that she's getting the Kindle version, hopefully from ghostboxradio.com, Ghostbox Book Club. Just throwing it out there. Do it, but do whatever you feel is right. No pressure. Get it. Anyway, so we've been talking about President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. He met with aliens, and this was at Edwards Air Force Base, right?
Right. Eisenhower was a courageous man. He was in the Army for decades and decades. You don't get to his position by being a coward or by being hesitant. He was used to bringing different people together to get them on the same page. And he was the first American president to have a pilot's license. He knew all about aircraft, aerodynamics. It was his business to know to America's advantage in the war and in the Cold War that he served as president during in the 1950s. So after 1 year in office, he went out to Palm Springs and then under the cover of darkness went out to Edwards and spoke to these humanoids from another planet. I confess I don't have quite an exact description of them for you, but a April 1954 Special Operations Manual came out, leaked a few years ago. It was about how the American military intelligence handles extraterrestrial visitation. Mm-hmm. And they gave a list of 4 different types of alien visitors. And the first one sounds a lot like what this test pilot said showed up. They were very human-like, only with the little differences, and maybe like a slightly grayish yellow skin tone, only a little fuzz at the top of their heads, no hair. They had human-like features.
Kind of like Eisenhower.
Yeah, it does sound
kind of like Eisenhower, to be honest.
Yeah. Maybe they wanted to meet their cousin, like a family reunion.
We relate to you. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. It is a good joke because it's kind of real. Eisenhower was losing his hair, and he was getting to be an old man, maybe getting a little gray in his skin tone. But anyway, he was the leader of the free world, and this is why extraterrestrials took the time to risk everything and come on down. They asked him to stop with these reckless nuclear bomb test detonations. And Eisenhower was in charge of that and insisted, we've got to know what we've got on our hands, and our scientists need to be able to fully fathom the power of these atom bombs. And they were cranking them out in factories at an alarming rate and testing them under the ground, under the sea, above ground, and then up in space. And there was fallout and contamination. And the aliens supposedly have been monitoring our world, knew our language, our culture, our customs, and knew about the test program and said, please stop doing this, stop polluting the planet. So I think that's a pretty good, legitimate reason to have landed and to ask the man in charge. He was the most popular man on the face of the earth, being a war hero and a landslide winner in a presidential election. Super popular. Ike. I like Ike. I think everyone in history does. He was a pretty effective president. Some rate him in the top 10 in U.S. history. So Eisenhower listened to them and turned them down. He says, I'm not going to disarm unilaterally. I want to see some other nations, like the Soviets or the Chinese or such, or even the British had the nuclear bomb by the early 50s. Yeah. So it wasn't all that successful an effort, but they made their point clear. And they also asked Eisenhower, could we start an education program for the people of Earth? We want to let people know you're not alone in the universe, that there are visitors from other worlds, and that we could teach you and get you ready for this possibility. And Eisenhower turned that down too. He said, I just don't think we're ready for this. It might cause a panic. He doesn't want to be a president where people are like leaving their jobs, leaving college, quitting their religion, upsetting the financial markets, your business investments, and going into another Great Depression, like with a stock market crash. It would be a disaster. He would go down as one of the worst presidents if this was handled in the wrong way. And his way was to try to keep it covered up and study the issue privately. So back then, he may have made the right move. Today, I think we're much more attuned to ETs through movies, TV shows, graphic novels, comic books, internet, my books, and everyone else's books. And so I think we could handle it better, but would there still be kind of not a mass panic, but a bit of disillusionment with the establishment as we have it now, that they've been hiding this all along, that they've known for decades, and we are in contact, at least used to be. And so I don't know what the reaction would be today if this did get out, but I think someday it might be acknowledged by the government, maybe in the year 2054, and say, look, 100 years ago, you're ready to hear for this. But I put together the story as best I could based on like dozens of sources that heard little bits and pieces of the story, including a man who worked at the Pentagon and saw still photos from this film footage. Apparently there were 2 film cameras rolling, possibly documentary film or what they call newsreels. And one of them was in color and the other black and white. And supposedly one of the cameras got too close to the action when the aliens put on an air show. They flew back and forth to say, Mr. Eisenhower, look what we can do. We can get this technology to you, and you can infuse it into American airplane technology. But it proved to be too much over our heads. But they put on an air show for Eisenhower, and he and his bodyguards were suitably dazzled by airships that could go up and down and back and forth and freeze in the air or land quietly, no exhaust, no propellers, no wings, just discs and elongated craft that seemed to defy our laws of gravity. And in this way, Eisenhower was a little too impressed. Like, again, this is going to be too much for our people to handle. If they see this sort of thing flying around in the atmosphere, maybe getting tangled up in our own jet plane traffic and helicopters and private planes, and setting off a panic on the people down below, like what's going on, or are we going to be invaded? So you had to keep that in mind, and you can understand more and more when you think about it, why he had to ask them, could you stay at arm's length and, not show yourself, don't sit down and start talking to people, don't hover over a major city and set off a hysterical rampage to get out. And, you can come here, but do it quietly in rural settings when there's no one around. And so there was an agreement formed.
Okay.
And that was what Nixon may have been amending at the time of his Jackie Gleason encounter in 1973.
So the agreement was you can come to Earth, don't make a big deal of it, and abduct people in private. We don't want to hear about it.
That's
we don't want to know
basically
about it.
Yeah. There was a document that was leaked in 2017. And I think it's real. And I've talked to other UFO researchers, and they think it's either very real or quite possibly real. And in it, it mentions Eisenhower did have this meeting, and he had two more, one in February of 1955 and another one in the summertime. And then he hammered out this agreement, and that they were friendly aliens, and as long as everyone adhered to this agreement, the aliens had a base in rural Nevada out in the desert that they could land and receive American technology and flora and fauna samples and everything, and that in exchange they would bring us technology that we could learn from, and maybe some specimens from their world. Sounds pretty wild. It might be true, who knows? But that would have been a good place to keep the public from seeing this sort of thing in the blazing hot desert where there's no one around for like 100 miles.
Right.
And the American Air Force Base was mostly abandoned. So they turned it into a kind of landing scientific lab, according to this document.
Interesting. And we're not talking about Area 51?
We could be, but I don't think so. It might have been this S4, Section 4, that was nearby Area 51 that supposedly Bob Lazar worked at.
Yeah.
And had this like a big, long garage full of extraterrestrial craft, like up to 9 of them, some of them damaged, some of them completely intact. And we've never been able to fully confirm his story. It's so frustrating, like everything else in ufology. You think you got a real story, you got the solid proof, and it just kind of slips away. Something turns out wrong with it, or someone disputes it and has a good point. Bob Lazar would be more credible if he had the hard proof of his education and his background where he worked, but they may have stripped and whitewashed his records. He did find some records of where he was employed, I think at Los Alamos, like a telephone directory of his employment there. So the government can be kind of ruthless if you go forward with this information. So this is another reason why everyone kept their mouth shut about the Eisenhower encounter. They were sworn to secrecy by Ike after it was over, and they said it was for life. And one man defied that and decided, this story is going to slip away unless I talk about it in the early 1980s. So thank goodness he did. And it hit the National Enquirer and a few newspapers like the Toronto Star, I think. And it was somewhat known. It might have been like a joke to Johnny Carson or something at night. Yeah. But the story began to kind of go viral in the 80s. And over the years, little bits and pieces kept adding up. And it was actually mentioned in Valor magazine in October of 1954. That's kind of a swashbuckling magazine in which an author said, I visited Edwards Air Force Base a few months ago in the summer, and these guys at the base swore up and down Eisenhower had been here to attend to extraterrestrial matters. And it sounded wild, but they printed the story way back then. And Frank Edwards was a famous radio broadcaster on MBS. That radio system is long gone, but he was very popular. He had like over 1 million listeners, and he was into UFOs and would occasionally lace an ET sighting or a UFO sighting into his broadcast. And he first reported this in the the spring of 54, and he soon found himself out of a job. He got fired.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up writing books and such, but his career never fully recovered. But he was super popular at the time. And again, you could say, well, it's because he talked too much. Maybe so. Or they were just making cutbacks and wanted to ditch his salary or something. But it's so tough to get a read on what the government is doing and why, and is it in our best interest, or are they just paranoid?
It's really interesting too, the idea of like Eisenhower is very conservative. I mean, and I don't mean politics wise per se. I mean as a human being, a very conservative person, like you said, very Christian, whatever. And first thing that comes to my mind is, what if it was a few years later and it was Kennedy that they spoke to and laid out those same like questions and same offers, and to see, I really wonder how different that would be. And I understand that that's 5 years later, 6 years later, but still, just like the difference, complete difference in their personalities makes me wonder what we would have been in now if they actually talked to President Kennedy instead of President Eisenhower.
Yeah. I've got a whole chapter in this book towards the end on other U.S. presidents, and I was surprised myself to find Eisenhower and Kennedy couldn't have been more diverse in their views and their ages. He was in the Army. JFK was in the Navy. He was an older man. Kennedy was the youngest U.S. president. They kept in touch. They talked by phone. They exchanged letters. They met at Camp David, and that wasn't enough. Kennedy flew all the way out to Palm Springs and met with Eisenhower in person at Ike's home on a golf course 3 different times in his short presidency. They had to have absolute secrecy about some sort of issue, that they could not send aides back and forth to discuss it, put it in letter form, or even trust the White House switchboard and the telephone system. So what do you think was going on that JFK needed to fly all the way out to Palm Springs? And, you know, the idea that we have this treaty, and do we renew it? Do we end it or amend it? That's certainly something that comes up. I'm also sure that the Vietnam War was discussed and the Cold War, but those things they could have done more when Eisenhower came to Washington. So if Kennedy had a close encounter of his own, I'm not quite aware of it, but there was an interesting story I put in the book. You'll have to read it, of a man who claims he did take pictures of Kennedy doing something of an unusual nature with some entity that may not have been from this world. So I'll just kind of leave it at that.
So once again, folks, the book is called President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. Please go to Amazon, get the book, or you can also get it through GhostBox Radio, GhostBox Book Club, and the affiliated link will help me out as well. Let's go ahead, take our next break. When we come back, we got more to talk about. Put your questions in the comments section, or any comments that you have. We'll be talking more about Eisenhower. I have another question about Kennedy. We're just having this great conversation, and join us and join in too. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. Greg Bakun here. I love historic tours of Minneapolis and seeing everything it has to offer. But if you know me, I like to include a little spooky in my tours, which is why I found the perfect combination. Minneapolis Trolley Tours does this amazing candlelight ghost tour that you have to check out. It's an extremely immersive experience. It's a trolley trip that starts out at a haunted mansion, traveling around Minneapolis locations exposing ghost stories that the public and business owners would rather left untold. Then a tour of the aforementioned haunted mansion where ghosts of past residents from the 1800s reside, plus a lot of surprises to discover. Next, experience Gertrude's After Hours. Did I mention Gertrude is the mansion's most famous ghost? Maybe she'll show up. And you finish up the tour at Gertrude's Lounge in the haunted basement of the mansion with refreshments and Q&A. The trolleys are climate controlled and the mansion is restored to perfection. Check out MinneapolisTrolleyTours.com for more information.
Greg Bakun here. I've told you about the out-of-the-world roast beef sandwiches at Maverick's Real Roast Beef, but I haven't told you about their Philly steak sandwiches. turkey, bacon, avocado sandwich, BLT, crispy chicken, fish sandwiches, brisket, or pulled pork. Okay, you get the idea. They make a lot of delicious food to the same standard as their famous roast beef sandwiches, and now I'm starving. I'm going to go to Maverick's Real Roast Beef off Lexington and Roseville, and you need to go too. Check out their menu at mavericksbeef.com.
Gritty Gear Company is a great place to go for clothing that is fun and expressive. But did you know we also do custom orders on demand? We've worked with all types of companies and organizations, from first responders to even a certain radio station. Our team is here to help you look amazing. Our clothing is of the highest quality, and you will love your logo on the finished product. We are a locally owned small business who simply wants you to look great. Find out more at grittygearcompany.com.
We know you value buying local, especially when it comes to your magical supplies. So if you're looking for grimoires, decks, jewelry, candles, or herbs that are locally sourced, then come on down to Magus Books and Herbs. Curated for your ritual, ceremonial, spiritual, and spellwork needs, we've got all the tools to make your working extra. So make that prosperity ritual one that keeps on giving by visiting us at 1848 Central Avenue Northeast in Minneapolis, or visit us online at magusbooks.com.
Have you ever met someone who not only can help you on a deep spiritual level, but also potentially change your life? Refined Divine is an extremely gifted psychic medium who travels the nation and lives right here in the Midwest. And she offers mediumship, mentorship, house and business parties, energy healing, palm readings, and so much more. Refined Divine has helped thousands, and she can help you.
Hi, this is Psychic Medium Deb. I cannot wait to hear from you. You can go to refineddivinepsychic.com.
And join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We're going to do a replay tomorrow night, and that's going to be with guest author Donald R. Schmidt. And he wrote an incredible book, or co-wrote an incredible book called Witness to Roswell. And we're talking about the 75th anniversary edition. We didn't talk a whole lot. I mean, an hour is not enough to talk about the countless interviews that they conducted over so many years about Roswell, and whether or not it was really a UFO crash landing. Here's a spoiler alert. It was. And this book is pretty amazing. Donald was a great guest, and we're going to be talking with him on this replay tomorrow. For those of you who watch Myth or Mystery, we are taking a week off. We'll be back on September 5th. And then I will be back with Adam on Friday for Casual Friday as we head into the Labor Day weekend. So please join us for that. We'll put out the question of the week Friday morning as well. I am talking with author Paul Blake Smith. We're talking about President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. And the thing that is showing up a lot here in the comments section and stuff, and something I wanted to ask you about. And for those of you who are interested, there's a great book out, and it's called Diary of Secrets, UFO Conspiracies, and the Mysterious Death of Marilyn Monroe. It's written by Nick Redfern. And the idea of President Kennedy and UFOs and stuff, and there's a lot of conspiracies as to why President Kennedy was assassinated. One of the ones that is very clear, a lot of people talk about, is his desire to want to be more public about aliens, UFOs. And the book about Marilyn Monroe here was saying that Marilyn Monroe took meticulous notes of the pillow talk between both Kennedys and her, and which is the reason why both of them had to die. All of them had to die. What are your thoughts on that?
While aliens may not have been the main reason to get rid of one, two, or three of them, JFK, RFK, or Monroe, Marilyn kind of couldn't keep her mouth shut.
Right.
And she started blabbing over the phone, which was tapped, about what the Kennedys told her. And supposedly she said that the President Kennedy went to an Air Force base out west, didn't say which, maybe Edwards, and saw some things that were from another world. And she described what she was told, like little gray beings with big black eyes, might have been Roswell or something of that nature. Now, she confided also into a friend named Robert Slater. And in the 90s, Slater gave an interview to Encounters, a TV show. and said, Marilyn told me this, that in her last days alive, she and I met on a beach out in like Malibu and near Point Doom. And she showed me her diary and a bunch of notes she'd been taking. And she said, and Robert Slater said, you need to get rid of this. This is like a stick of dynamite. This is going to get you in big trouble. But he said she described the aliens as your typical grays with big heads, big black eyes, skinny little bodies. And that it was not a joke that she had learned this. So among other secrets that she knew, she was a little riddled with pill prescriptions that was getting her to talk too much and altering her mood. She liked a lot of champagne. She was used to attention, and she was going to call a press conference. And so what a coincidence. She turned up dead under most mysterious circumstances. So we'll see as we get more into the, I guess, 62nd anniversary of death was this month. She died in August of 62. As the years go by, maybe we can get more information on this. Somebody needs to leak some more documents from the government. We would all appreciate it if you would.
Yeah, I mean, what's the holdup here? Let's get things moving, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're absolutely right. And, you know, not that we want to turn this into a Marilyn Monroe conversation per se, but I mean, when you talk about like what you just said, it's like this is a person that was really messed around in the system. You know what I mean? That I mean, just she is being used by so many people, and when that becomes obvious, it's very sad. It's very sad to hear that, you know, someone who was really quite powerful, really in her own right, that people just stompled. I just came up with a new word. Go ahead and use that in your next book, Paul.
Yeah, Marilyn was used by a lot of people, sadly. But here's the deal. She was abandoned by her father, and her mother was confined to a mental asylum. And she was raised in a series of adopted homes and orphanages, and grew up in a very poor existence and wanted to be loved and feel important. So when she blossomed into a beautiful woman, she became irresistible, and even politicians, Frank Sinatra, the Rat Pack, they all wanted to date her, impress her, tell her things, you know, and she started writing it down. And that's in an era where you didn't talk and you could get into big trouble, and the government could cover it up pretty effectively. So it was the whole combination, the perfect storm for her to unfortunately be snuffed out and call it a apparent suicide. The whole thing is very, very suspicious, if not just ludicrous, some of the stuff. Supposedly she died of 44 Nembutal capsules, of which the autopsy didn't find a single one not dissolved or half dissolved in her mouth, down her throat, or in her stomach. But she had Nembutal in her system, so she could have been injected or had it infused rectally, and then they could have said, oh, look, she swallowed too many pills, don't ask too many questions, end of story. And the press swallowed it and moved on. And in bits and pieces over the decades, kind of like the UFO stories, we began to find more and more that we were lied to, and that the government knew more about what was going on behind the scenes, but you just didn't talk in those days. So Marilyn paid the ultimate price for being a little too knowledgeable and a little too blabby. It's interesting to note that I think her housekeeper came over to the house bereaved and grieving when she found out Marilyn had died. And she said there were government agents in suits and ties throwing her notes and some of her notebooks into a fireplace and burning them on the spot. And so the famous red notebook, the red diary, might have survived that. But she took a lot of notes on spiral little steno pads, and they did not survive. That was way too explosive for her to have revealed even in her death afterwards. So, the truth got trampled on a lot back in those days. Never more an example of this than in Marilyn Monroe's death.
And I would even say Kennedy's as well, to a certain extent. Chuck asked the question, and we've kind of talked about this. I want to put a spin on this. So could Kennedy have been assassinated because of what he knew about aliens, and his push for space exploration is a hot button reason? But I'll take that a step further and be like, he was angering a lot of people. It wasn't even just the space and alien stuff. It was also his anti-mob stance. There was a lot of stuff that was happening. He was being very progressive, wasn't he? That that you could point to a lot of different things that could be a reason why Kennedy was assassinated.
I wrote a book called JFK and the Willard Hotel Plot. In that Oswald was sighted in late September, early October at the Willard Hotel, which is 1 block from the White House. He was noted after the assassination. A driver for the government and a chauffeured limo said, I saw him at this hotel. And it was definitely Oswald. And supposedly Oswald was in Mexico City at the time. And all the descriptions of Oswald do not match the actual Oswald. Someone claiming to be Oswald showed up at the American Embassy. What's the point of the story? Kennedy was indeed the victim of a plot in which Oswald was involved. He was the sucker to fire a gun noisily and be thrown overboard afterwards, that they needed a fall guy. If the president's going to be killed, somebody's got to go to jail. So they picked Oswald and they killed him before he could talk. Jack Ruby was very mobbed up and he was dying of cancer. And he knew it at the time. He had been diagnosed in the summer of '63 with terminal cancer that was inoperable. So he was the perfect person to shut up Oswald and knew that he was going to go as himself. So that kept the conspiracy talk trampled down at the time. And only later did we find out a lot of this wild stuff. But that the president was the victim of what initially began as a mafia plot, because you hit upon this in your statement. The Kennedys had a war on organized crime.
Yeah.
What are the mafia going to do? Well, they're going to fight back with everything they got. And what do they do for a living? Kill people. I looked it up on the date of my birth. Sam Giancano had a bunch of politicians either harassed or shot to death in Chicago way back then. And it was his MO, his method of operation, to just say, shoot him, kill him. He didn't care about anyone's life. And he may have been behind Marilyn Monroe's death and President Kennedy's death. But the mafia had a problem. They didn't want things investigated by the Congress, by the FBI, by the media, or anyone in the public, and have the trail lead right up to their door. So they had to have help in pulling this off. And that's where we get into some members of the intelligence community that were pretty much blackmailed into it. They didn't have much of a choice. The mafia had been running operations with CIA help. And so, lest that get out to the public, the CIA didn't care much for Kennedy anyway and thought that he was a threat. And as you mentioned, agencies like the CIA or the NSA or the Defense Intelligence Agency were not thrilled at all with Kennedy's idea to share lots of information with the Soviets and maybe combine our space programs or something like that, or our UFO awareness. So he began mounting up reasons for enemies to take it seriously of eliminating him permanently, which they did.
It's incredible. And I if you're up for it, I got to have you back on in November. When we come around time to the anniversary of the assassination, I'd love to talk to you more about it. I had somebody on a couple of years ago, and their stance was that they didn't think it was a conspiracy at all, but they couldn't really give a whole lot of information into it. And it's like, well, it's okay to have a point of view, but then like you're citing a lot of things that I think a lot of people, if they don't know, it's good for them to know, I think, because it's a tangled web, quite honestly.
If you've ever seen the Zapruder film or other photos of Dealey Plaza on that day, you'll notice that President Kennedy had a few, like 2 on either side, flanking the back of his car, 2 motorcycle cops on each side. Nothing protecting him on the sides or in front. And that's where so many people said they heard the shots. It's not a coincidence.
No.
The Secret Service laid out, I put in my book, 10 different things that went differently in Dealey Plaza than the normal protection, because they knew Dallas was a very dangerous city with a lot of extremists, a lot of haters who had attacked Adlai Stevenson just a few weeks before. So you would naturally surround him with a ring of steel, wouldn't you? Instead, just the opposite. They left him wide open, and he was shot from in front and in back. And one shot pierced the windshield. And, there's this bullet hole, and you can see pictures of it. And, we don't want to talk about that. And they quickly had the windshield changed and a new one installed. And a lot of stories got squelched at the time. And again, we start finding out things over the decades, and you could start piecing it together. My book, JFK and the Willard Hotel Plot, is no longer able to be purchased. My publisher of that went out of business. So, I'm looking for a new publisher that would get that back out on the market.
Now we have less than a minute left. I want to just say really fast. There's a Bruder film. There's footage, because the government took that for a while, right? And then they returned it, and there's footage missing now, right?
Yeah, just happened to lose some key slides out of the footage, and it just happened to be flown to CIA headquarters for film experts to examine before it was released to the public with these slides or frames missing. And also they may have put in kind of a dark blob over the back of the head wound to cover that. And, boy, they did a number on the truth there that day.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. I mean, I didn't expect this to turn into a JFK assassination conversation, but boy, I'm glad it did. Paul, I want to have you back and talk about that if you're up for that.
We will remember in November.
I will do so. Once again, the book is called President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. Paul Blake Smith is the author of it. You can get it through Amazon. Go to GhostBox Radio, GhostBox Book Club. Feel free to get it that way. Paul, thank you so very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It's good to discuss this, and we'll see each other in a few months.
Absolutely. We'll be back tomorrow talking about Roswell. Everyone, have a good night. We'll see you later.